The sparks flew from Karen's perfectly manicured fingers as she screamed, her designer heels smoking on the wet pavement. 3 months of stolen electricity, 3 months of condescending smirks and legal threats, all leading to this moment. Marcus watched from his window as his neighbor discovered what happens when you steal from an electrical engineer who's had enough. The trap was set, the current was live, and Karen was about to learn that some people fight back with 240 volts of pure justice. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the cool glass of his kitchen window, watching his neighbor Karen Whitmore stride across her pristine lawn like she owned the entire cul-de-sac, which, given her behavior over the past 6 months, she apparently believed she did. The morning sun caught the metallic sheen of the extension cord snaking from his outdoor outlet, across the property line, and straight into Karen's backyard workshop. The same workshop where she'd been running her boutique candle business for the past 3 months, and his electricity. His electricity bill sat open on the kitchen counter behind him, $847 this month, nearly triple his usual amount. Unbelievable, Marcus muttered, taking another sip of his coffee. The bitter taste matched his mood perfectly. His phone buzzed. A text from his daughter Sarah at college. Dad, can you send money for textbooks? The financial aid doesn't cover everything. Marcus stared at the message, then at the bill, then at the orange extension cord that might as well have been a direct line from his wallet to Karen's pocket. Sarah's education versus subsidizing his neighbor's hobby business. The choice should have been obvious, but apparently Karen had made it for him. He grabbed his jacket and headed outside. The October air bit at his cheeks as he walked toward the property line. Karen was bent over a steaming pot in her workshop, the industrial wax melter humming contentedly. The smell of vanilla and theft filled the air. Morning, Karen. She looked up, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Everything about Karen Whitmore screamed suburban perfection, from her yoga-toned figure to her color-coordinated garden tools. Everything except her ethics. Oh, hi Marcus. Her smile was bright and empty. Gorgeous morning, isn't it? Listen, we need to talk about this. He gestured toward the extension cord. Karen followed his gaze, and her smile never wavered. Oh, that old thing? I've been meaning to get my own outlet installed. You know how contractors are always pushing back their schedules. Karen, it's been 3 months. Has it really? Time flies. She turned back to her wax melter, dismissing him with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been told no. Marcus felt his jaw clench. In his 20 years as an electrical engineer, he'd dealt with plenty of difficult clients. But Karen existed in a special category of oblivious entitlement. My electric bill has tripled. I can't afford to keep paying for your business. Now Karen did look up, and the warmth drained from her expression like water from a broken dam. Excuse me, the extension cord, it needs to go. Today? Karen straightened slowly, her hand still holding the wooden stirring stick. Are you suggesting that I'm somehow responsible for your utility costs? The question hung in the air between them, so absurd that Marcus almost laughed. Almost. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating a fact. That cord runs from my outlet to your equipment. You're using my electricity to run your business. I think you're confused about property lines, Marcus. Karen's voice had taken on the patronizing tone she used with service workers and anyone else she considered beneath her station. This workshop sits entirely on my property. What I do here is my business, with my power. Power that happens to be available at the property line. She waved the stirring stick vaguely. If you have a problem with the electrical setup, maybe you should have thought about that before you bought a house with such convenient outlet placement. Marcus stared at her. In all his years of engineering, he'd never encountered logic quite this breathtakingly twisted. Karen, you can't just... I think this conversation is over. She turned back to her work, humming softly to herself. I have orders to fill. Some of us actually work for a living. The dismissal hit him like a physical blow. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching her stir her stolen electricity wax, humming her oblivious tune. The morning sun cast her shadow. Across the property line, a dark outline that seemed to creep onto his land, just like everything else about her. He walked back to his house, each step heavier than the last. Inside, he sat at his kitchen table and opened his laptop. His email inbox showed 3 more messages from Sarah's school about outstanding fees, to past due notices from credit cards he'd maxed out helping with her expenses, and a cheerful newsletter from the electric company about energy conservation tips. His phone rang. Sarah's contact photo filled the screen, her bright smile from last Christmas. Back when he thought he had his finances under control. Hey sweetheart, Dad, did you get my text? I really need those books. And the bookstore said they might not have them next week if I wait. Marcus looked out his window. Karen was loading finished candles into shipping boxes, each one representing profit made with his stolen electricity. How much do you need? 300. I know it's a lot, but it's fine. I'll transfer it today. Are you sure? You sound stressed. Marcus watched Karen seal another box with packing tape. Probably made enough profit this morning to cover Sarah's books twice over. I'm fine, honey. Just neighbor troubles. The HOA lady again. Something like that. After Sarah hung up, Marcus sat in his kitchen and did the math. His savings account showed $1,247. Sarah's books would leave him with less than $1,000 between his family and financial disaster. Meanwhile, Karen was building her candle empire, one stolen kilowatt-hour at a time. He opened his banking app and transferred the money to Sarah. His available balance dropped to $947. Through the window, he watched Karen load her car with finished products. She paused at her mailbox, pulling out what looked like checks for her candles, no doubt. She examined each envelope with the satisfied smile of someone whose profit margins were artificially inflated by theft. Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification from his electric company. Your usage this month is tracking 340% above normal. Consider scheduling an energy audit to identify inefficiencies. He set the phone down and stared at the extension cord. In his engineering work, every problem had a solution. Every circuit had a logic. Every system could be understood, analyzed, and controlled. Karen Whitmore had just become a problem that needed solving. He opened his laptop and began researching electrical codes, property law, and the precise amperage requirements of industrial wax melters. If Karen wanted to play games with electricity, she'd picked a fight with the wrong neighbor. The afternoon sun slanted through his kitchen window as Marcus sketched circuit diagrams on a legal pad. Outside, Karen's workshop hummed, with stolen power, churning out profit while bleeding his bank account dry. But every circuit had a breaking point. Every system had a weakness. And Marcus Chen was very, very good at finding weaknesses. The last thing he wrote on his legal pad before closing it was a single word: justice. Tomorrow, Karen Whitmore was going to discover what happened when you stole from someone who understood exactly how electricity worked and exactly how to make it work for him. Marcus arrived at Morrison's Hardware at 7 a.m. sharp, 30 minutes before opening. He sat in his Honda Civic, sipping gas station coffee and watching the parking lot fill with contractors' trucks. The morning routine of honest people doing honest work with their own electricity. Bob Morrison unlocked the front door at 7:30, his weathered face creasing into a smile when he spotted Marcus. Little early for weekend projects, isn't it? Emergency repair. Marcus lied smoothly. Neighbors having electrical issues. Inside, Marcus moved through the store with the precision of someone who knew exactly what he needed. Ground fault circuit interrupter outlets, heavy-duty extension cords rated for outdoor use, weatherproof electrical boxes, a digital multimeter that could measure voltage, current, and resistance with laboratory precision. And one very special item from the electrical specialty section. Planning to rewire half the neighborhood? Bob joked as he rang up the purchases. Something like that. The drive home took 12 minutes. Long enough for Marcus to mentally review the plan he'd spent all night perfecting, and short enough that Karen wouldn't notice his absence. She was a creature of habit. Saturday mornings meant yoga at 9, shopping until noon, then an afternoon of candle-making fury to fill weekend orders. He had a 4-hour window. Back in his garage, Marcus spread his purchases across his workbench, like a surgeon laying out instruments. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, the kind of solution that made his engineering professors proud 20 years ago. Karen had been stealing his electricity by plugging into his outdoor outlet. She assumed that outlet was just a standard 120-volt receptacle, identical to every other outlet in every other suburban home. She was wrong. Marcus had wired that particular outlet himself when he bought the house, running a dedicated 240-volt line to handle heavy-duty equipment. It was currently stepped down to 120 volts through a small transformer hidden inside the weatherproof box. Standard code, completely legal, and utterly invisible to anyone who didn't understand electrical systems, but transformers could be bypassed. He opened the outlet box and examined his handiwork from 5 years ago. Clean, professional wiring with plenty of room for modifications. The transformer sat snugly in the back corner, a small gray cube that had been faithfully converting 240 volts to 120 volts for half a decade. Thanks for your service, Marcus murmured, disconnecting the transformer's input leads. The next part required delicate work. He installed a new ground fault circuit safety device that would cut power instantly if it detected an electrical fault. To anyone inspecting the setup, it would look like a standard safety upgrade, the kind of thing any responsible homeowner might install. What they wouldn't see was the hidden switch Marcus wired behind the GFCI outlet, a simple toggle that would bypass the transformer and send 240 volts straight to any device plugged into his outlet. Double the voltage, double the current, quadruple the power. More than enough to fry Karen's expensive wax melter. Marcus tested the circuit 3 times, measuring voltages with obsessive precision. 120 volts with the hidden switch off. 240 volts. With the switch on, the GFC, I would trip instantly if anything went wrong, cutting power before serious damage could occur. Well, serious damage to his house. Karen's equipment was another matter. At 8:45, he watched Karen emerge from her front door in designer yoga pants and a matching sports bra that probably cost more than his daughter's textbooks. She loaded her yoga mat into her white BMW and backed out of her driveway with the casual, confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything. Marcus waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then walked to the property line. The extension cord lay in the grass like an orange snake, exactly where Karen had left it 3 months ago. He followed it to her workshop, where it connected to a heavy-duty power strip that fed her entire operation. The industrial wax melter, LED lighting, a small space heater, and what looked like a new label printer she'd added since yesterday. 4 pieces of equipment, all running on electricity she'd stolen from him, all rated for 120-volt operation, all about to receive a very expensive education in electrical engineering. Back at his house, Marcus made one final check of his work. The hidden switch was concealed behind a loose piece of siding, accessible only if you knew exactly where to look. The GFCI outlet looked completely normal from the outside. Even a qualified electrician would have to disassemble the box to discover the bypass circuit. He flipped the hidden switch to the on position and felt a surge of something that wasn't quite satisfaction. Not yet. At 11:30, Karen's BMW turned back into the driveway. She'd added a few shopping bags to her collection, probably supplies for her theft-funded business. Marcus watched from his kitchen window as she carried her purchases into the workshop. The wax melter would take about 10 minutes to heat up. Her usual routine was to start it first, then organize her materials while it reached operating temperature. She'd done the same thing every Saturday for 3 months, blissfully unaware that her neighbor was documenting her habits. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his brother David. "How's the Karen situation? Still bleeding you dry?" He typed back. "Being handled." Legal route. Marcus looked out at his modified electrical outlet, then at Karen's workshop where she was undoubtedly starting her weekend production run. Engineering route? That sounds ominous. Sometimes the best solutions are exactly 11:47. Marcus heard. The first pop that came from Karen's workshop, a sharp electrical crack, followed by a mechanical grinding noise, like expensive equipment dying in real time. Then another pop, then a third. Through his window, he watched smoke begin to curl from the workshop's open door. Karen's scream cut through the Saturday morning quiet like a fire alarm. Marcus grabbed his coffee mug and walked onto his back porch, positioning himself for an optimal view of the unfolding drama. The engineering part of his brain was already calculating the damage. 240 volts applied to 120-volt equipment would cause immediate overcurrent conditions, rapidly overheating internal components until they failed catastrophically. Karen burst from her workshop, her face flushed with panic and confusion. She was holding her phone, probably calling 911 or the fire department or her insurance company, none of whom would be able to help her with this particular problem. "Marcus?" She spotted him on his porch and ran toward the property line. "Something's wrong with your electricity. My equipment just exploded." Marcus took a sip of his coffee. "That's terrible. What happened?" "I don't know. Everything was working fine, and then there were sparks and smoke," and she gestured wildly toward her workshop, where gray smoke was still drifting from the doorway. "This is a disaster. I have orders to fill. Have you called an electrician? It's Saturday. No one's available until Monday." Karen's voice climbed toward hysteria. "I need that equipment working today." Marcus nodded sympathetically. Electrical problems can be tricky, especially with sensitive equipment. "You're an engineer, right? Can't you fix it?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus looked at Karen's desperate face, then at the smoke still rising from her workshop, then at the extension cord that connected her disaster to his electrical outlet. "I'd be happy to take a look," he said finally, "but I should mention running business. Equipment on residential circuits can be dangerous. The voltage fluctuations, the amperage requirements, it's really not safe." Karen waved his concerns away. "It's been working fine for months." "Has it? Because this looks like what happens when you draw too much power through an undersized connection." Marcus gestured toward the smoking workshop. "The equipment tries to pull more current than the circuit can handle, and eventually something gives way." "Are you saying this is my fault?" Marcus met her eyes. "I'm saying electricity doesn't care about our intentions. It follows the laws of physics. And physics just sent you a very expensive invoice." Karen stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw the exact instant when understanding began to dawn. Her eyes narrowed, her perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists, and her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You did this." Marcus raised his coffee mug and a mock toast. "I fixed an electrical hazard on my property. The fact that it inconvenienced your theft operation is just a happy coincidence." The transformation was immediate and spectacular. Karen's suburban perfection cracked like a mask, revealing something raw and ugly underneath. She stepped forward, crossing onto his property for the first time in 6 months. "You son of a bitch. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? About 3 months' worth of stolen electricity? I'd guess I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth." Marcus almost smiled. "For what? Upgrading my own electrical system on my own property? Good luck proving damages when you were stealing the electricity in the first place." Karen's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This isn't over." "You're right," Marcus said quietly. "It's not." He walked back into his house, leaving Karen standing in his backyard. surrounded by the smoking ruins of her theft-funded empire. Through his kitchen window, he watched her pace back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling lawyers or contractors or anyone who might help her rebuild. But Marcus wasn't done. Not yet. He had learned something important today. Karen. Marcus spent Sunday morning in his office, 3 monitors glowing with the kind of research that would make a private investigator jealous. 23 years of engineering had taught him that every system had documentation, every process had rules, and every rule had enforcement mechanisms. Karen Whitmore was about to discover just how many systems she'd been violating. The HOA regulations were a goldmine. Section 4.7 specifically prohibited commercial activities generating substantial traffic, noise, or odors. Section 8.2 required board approval for any modifications to property appearance, including temporary or permanent structures. Karen's workshop addition, which Marcus now realized she'd built without permits, violated both clauses. But the real treasure was buried in the county business licensing database. Karen's Whitmore Artisan Candles had been registered as a home-based business 8 months ago, with specific restrictions: no more than 2 employees, no customer visits to the residence, and absolutely no manufacturing that exceeded residential zoning limits. Her Instagram account told a different story. Marcus scrolled through it. Whitmore Candles, documenting everything. Photos of her workshop expansion tagged #new equipment. Videos of industrial wax melters with captions like scaling up production, customer testimonials mentioning pickup times and delivery schedules. A recent post about her team of local artisans helping with large orders. Every post was a violation. Every hashtag was evidence. His phone rang at 9:47 a.m. Unknown number. Mr. Chen, this is Rebecca Walsh from Walsh, Martinez & Associates. I represent Karen Whitmore regarding the electrical incident at your property yesterday. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Karen was moving faster than he'd expected. I'm not aware of any electrical incident at my property. Sir, my client's business equipment was damaged when you made unauthorized modifications to your electrical system. We're prepared to file suit for damages unless we can reach an amicable settlement. What modifications? A pause. We have witnesses who can testify that your outdoor outlet was functioning normally until yesterday morning, when you deliberately altered it to cause damage. Do you have evidence of these modifications? Another pause. Longer this time. We're prepared to hire expert witnesses, Ms. Walsh. Let me save you some time. Your client was stealing electricity from my residential outlet to run an unlicensed commercial operation in violation of county zoning laws, HOA regulations, and probably several fire codes. If she wants to discuss damages, I'd be happy to calculate exactly how much she owes me for 3 months of theft. The silence stretched so long Marcus wondered if the call had dropped. We'll be in touch, Walsh said finally, and hung up. Marcus smiled and returned to his research. By noon, he had enough evidence to bury Karen's operation 6 different ways. The question was which approach would hurt the most. His answer came from an unexpected source. At 12:15, his doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of purposeful expression that suggested official business. Mr. Chen, I'm Margaret Henderson, president of the Willowbrook HOA board. She held up an iPad showing photos of Karen's smoking workshop. I believe we need to talk. Marcus invited her in and made coffee while Margaret explained her visit. Apparently, 3 different neighbors had called about Saturday's electrical fire, and her investigation had uncovered some interesting discrepancies. According to our records, Mrs. Whitmore never submitted plans for her workshop addition. The structure appears to violate at least 4 sections of our architectural guidelines. Margaret scrolled through photos on her tablet. More concerning, are these social media posts suggesting she's running a commercial manufacturing operation? Marcus nodded sympathetically. I had wondered about that. The noise, the delivery trucks, the smell of industrial wax. You've documented these issues. I keep detailed records. Occupational hazard of being an engineer? Margaret's eyes lit up. Would you be willing to provide a formal complaint for our next board meeting? When is it? Thursday night. Emergency session. Marcus considered the timeline. Thursday would give him 4 days to complete his other preparations. I'd be happy to help. After Margaret left, Marcus returned to his computer and opened a new document. Formal complaint Whitmore. Property violations. He worked steadily through the afternoon, cross-referencing regulations, organizing evidence, and building an airtight case that would shut down Karen's operation permanently. At 4 p.m., his concentration was broken by the sound of hammering from next door. Through his office window, he watched Karen and 2 men in coveralls attempting to repair her damaged workshop. They'd already replaced the burned-out wax melter with an even larger model, and now they were installing what looked like a professional electrical panel. Interesting, Marcus murmured. He grabbed his camera and stepped onto his back porch, making no effort to hide his presence. The workers noticed him immediately, and one nudged Karen. She looked up from her clipboard, saw Marcus watching, and her face hardened into a mask of pure hatred. Problem, Marcus, she called out, just admiring the construction work. Looks expensive? I'm rebuilding. Better than before. Marcus raised his camera and took several photos. For insurance purposes. For my lawyers, smart documentation is important. He took another photo. I assume you pulled permits for the electrical work. The two workers exchanged glances. One of them, a man in his 50s with paint-stained coveralls, stepped forward. Ma'am, you? Said the permits were already approved. Karen's face flushed. They are. The paperwork is just ... delayed. Marcus lowered his camera. Dave Morrison does excellent electrical work. Been in business 20 years, never cuts corners on permits. He nodded toward the older worker. Isn't that right, Dave? Dave Morzon, Bob's brother from the hardware store, looked increasingly uncomfortable. We can't continue without proper permits. County regulations require. The permits are fine. Karen's voice climbed toward hysteria. This is private property. I can do whatever I want. Actually, Marcus said conversationally, residential, electrical work requires permits, inspections, and licensed contractors, especially for commercial-grade installations. He gestured toward the new electrical panel. That looks like a 200 MP service upgrade. Definitely requires county approval. Dave was already packing his tools. Ma'am, we'll need to see the permits before we can continue. Call us when you have the paperwork sorted out. Wait. Karen chased after the workers as they loaded their truck. I'll pay double, triple. Sorry, ma'am. Not worth losing our licenses. Marcus watched the truck pull away, leaving Karen standing in her driveway beside pallets of electrical equipment she couldn't legally install. Her rebuilt empire was already crumbling, and he hadn't even filed his HOA complaint yet. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Dad, my roommate's parents are getting divorced and fighting over money. Made me appreciate having you. Thanks for always being stable and putting family first. Marcus stared at the message, then at Karen, who was now pacing around her workshop like a caged animal. Sarah thought he was stable, responsible, the kind of father who put family first and handled problems through proper channels. She wasn't wrong, exactly, but she wasn't seeing the whole picture. Karen disappeared into her house and emerged 10 minutes later with her phone pressed to her ear. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but her body language screamed desperation. She was calling contractors, probably offering increasingly ridiculous amounts of money to find someone willing to work without permits. That evening, Marcus sat in his kitchen and made a list of every regulatory agency with jurisdiction over Karen's operation. County Planning and Zoning, Fire Department Commercial Inspections, Business Licensing Division, Environmental Health, for manufacturing odors, State Tax Authority for unreported commercial income. Each agency had forms, procedures, and enforcement mechanisms. Each had the power to investigate, fine, or shut down illegal operations. Each was a weapon in Marcus's growing arsenal, but as he compiled contact information and drafted complaint letters, a small voice in the back of his mind wondered if he was going too far. Karen had stolen from him, yes. She'd been arrogant and dismissive and entitled, but was destroying her entire livelihood a proportional response. The doubt lasted until he opened his electric bill. $1,247 this month, nearly 4 times his normal usage. Karen hadn't just stolen electricity, she'd stolen his daughter's future, 1 kilowatt at a time. Every dollar she'd taken was a dollar Sarah didn't have for school, for opportunities, for the life she deserved. Marcus sealed the first complaint letter and set it aside for mailing. Then he sealed the second, then the third. By the time he finished, he had 7 different agencies scheduled to receive formal complaints about Karen Whitmore's illegal operation. 7 different systems that would grind her ambitions into regulatory dust. Outside, Karen's workshop sat, dark and silent, her expensive new equipment, useless without licensed installation. She'd tried to steal from the wrong neighbor, and now every system designed to maintain order and fairness was turning against her. Marcus looked at his neat stack of complaint letters and felt something that might have been satisfaction, or justice, or maybe just the quiet contentment of an engineer who'd eyed the Willowbrook Community Center. Hadn't seen this many residents since the Great Mailbox Controversy of 2019. By 7 p.m. Thursday evening, every folding chair was occupied, and latecomers lined the walls like spectators at a prize fight. Word had spread through the neighborhood with the efficiency of suburban gossip. Karen Whitmore was finally going to face judgment. Marcus sat in the 3rd row, his evidence folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Behind him, he could hear the whispered conversations of neighbors who'd suffered through months of Karen's delivery trucks, industrial odors, and general disregard for community standards. Never parks legally. Smell keeps my windows closed all summer. Those giant UPS trucks blocking the street. Karen entered at exactly 7:05 p.m., flanked by her lawyer Rebecca Walsh and what appeared to be a public relations consultant. In an expensive suit, she'd clearly prepared for battle, dressed in a conservative navy blazer that screamed suburban respectability. Her smile was bright enough to power her old workshop. She chose a seat in the front row, directly across from the board table, and turned to wave at the assembled residents like a politician at a rally. The response was distinctly chilly. Margaret Henderson called the meeting to order with the kind of crisp authority that suggested decades of managing community disputes. Tonight we're addressing a formal complaint regarding violations of our community guidelines. Mr. Chen, as the complainant, you'll present your case first. Marcus stood and walked to the small podium, his folder in hand. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the rustle of someone unwrapping a cough drop. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Over the past 8 months, the property, at 1247 Maple Drive, has been operating an unlicensed commercial manufacturing facility in direct violation of our community guidelines, county zoning laws, and multiple health and safety regulations. He opened his folder and began methodically presenting his evidence. Photographs of delivery trucks blocking streets, social media posts advertising business hours and customer visits, screenshots of employee recruitment ads on local job boards, audio recordings of industrial equipment running past quiet hours. Section 4.7 of our community guidelines prohibits commercial activities generating substantial traffic, noise, or odors. Mrs. Whitmore's operation violates all 3 criteria. Karen's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but Karen brushed her away and stood up. I object to this character assassination. Mr. Chen is a vindictive neighbor who's retaliating because of a minor electrical dispute. Margaret Henderson's voice cut through the outburst like a blade. Mrs. Whitmore, you'll have your turn to respond. Please sit down. Marcus continued his presentation, each violation carefully documented and cross-referenced with relevant regulations. When he finished 20 minutes later, the room was dead silent. Mrs. Whitmore, your response? Karen approached the podium with the confidence of someone who'd never lost an argument at a school board meeting. This is all about jealousy and harassment. Mr. Chen can't stand seeing a successful woman entrepreneur. Ma'am, interrupted board member James Rodriguez, do you have permits for your workshop addition? The permits are ... in process. For 8 months. Karen's confidence flickered. County bureaucracy moves slowly. Rodriguez consulted his tablet. According to county records, no permit applications have been filed for your property since 2018. There must be some mistake. Marcus watched Karen's composure crack in real time. The careful preparation, the expensive lawyer, the community-minded blazer, all of it crumbling under basic factual questions. Board member Patricia Wells leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, how many employees work at your residence? I don't have employees. I have independent contractors. How many independent contractors? It varies. 4 or 5, depending on orders. Wells made a note. Your business license allows for no more than 2 non-resident workers. Those regulations are outdated. Small businesses need flexibility, ma'am. The regulations are current as of this year. I verified them this afternoon. Karen looked around the room like a trapped animal, her gaze finally settling on Marcus. The hatred in her eyes was so intense it was almost physical. This is all because of him. She pointed directly at Marcus. He sabotaged my equipment. He destroyed thousands of dollars of inventory. This is nothing but revenge. The room erupted in murmurs. Margaret Henderson banged her gavel twice. Mrs. Whitmore, are you accusing Mr. Chen of property damage? Yes, he admitted it. He deliberately damaged my electrical equipment. Marcus stood up slowly. Mrs. Henderson, may I respond, please? Mrs. Whitmore's equipment was damaged when she attempted to steal electricity from my residential outlet. The devices failed because they were designed for standard household current, not the industrial-grade power she was trying to draw illegally. Karen's lawyer finally managed to get her client's attention, whispering frantically. Karen's face went pale as she realized what she'd just admitted in front of 40 witnesses. That's not what I meant, ... but the damage was done. Margaret Henderson consulted with the other board members in hushed tones before addressing the room. Based on the evidence presented tonight, the board finds that the property at 1247 Maple Drive is in violation of community guidelines 4.7, 8.2, and 12.1. Mrs. Whitmore, you have 30 days to bring your property into compliance or face escalating fines. What does compliance mean? Complete cessation of commercial activities, removal of unauthorized structures, return to residential use only. Karen shot to her feet. You can't do this. I have a business to run. I have employees depending on me. Ma'am, you should have considered that before violating multiple regulations for 8 months. The meeting dissolved into chaos as Karen argued with the board. Her lawyer tried to control the damage, and 40 neighbors watched the spectacle with the fascination of Romans at the Colosseum. Marcus gathered his evidence folder and headed for the exit, his work complete. In the parking lot, he found himself face to face with Karen, who'd apparently been waiting for him. This isn't over, she hissed. You're right, it's not. What's that supposed to mean? Marcus unlocked his car door. Check your mail tomorrow. The county planning department is very interested in your unpermitted construction. So is the fire. Marshall and the IRS has some questions about unreported business income. Karen's face went white. You didn't. 7 different agencies, Karen. 7 different ways your little empire is about to come crashing down. Each one triggered by your own violations, documented with your own social media posts. "You son of a bitch. You stole from my family. You stole from my daughter's education. You dismissed me like I was nothing." Marcus got into his car and rolled down the window. "I'm an electrical engineer, Karen. I don't just understand circuits and systems. I understand how power flows, how networks connect, and what happens when you overload a system beyond its capacity." He started the engine. "You just got a very expensive lesson in system failure." The drive home took 8 minutes, long enough for Marcus to process what had just happened, and short enough that he could still see the community center's lights in his rearview mirror. Inside his house, he poured himself a scotch and sat in his kitchen, looking out at dark workshop. Tomorrow, the first of his complaint letters would reach its destination. By next week, inspectors would be crawling over her property like ants on spilled honey. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Dad, just wanted to say thanks again for everything. I know money's tight, but you never make me feel guilty about school expenses. You're the best." Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Sarah thought. He was selfless, putting her needs above his own comfort. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't seeing the full picture either. He'd just systematically destroyed a neighbor's livelihood using regulatory warfare and engineering precision. He'd turned every system designed to maintain order into a weapon against someone who'd wronged him. Was he the good guy in this story? The protective father fighting for his daughter's future? Or was he something darker, a man who'd discovered he enjoyed having power over others? Outside, Karen's house blazed with lights as she presumably worked through the night, trying to find some way to salvage her crumbling empire. Tomorrow would bring the first wave of official investigations. Next week would bring fines, citations, and forced shutdowns. Marcus finished his scotch and went to bed, leaving Karen to face the consequences of stealing from someone who understood exactly how systems worked and exactly how to make them work against her. The war was almost over, but the final battle would be the most dangerous of all.